what we did, I mean, I cashed in my retirement, right?
Wow.
I completely cashed in my retirement.
It's a big move, yeah.
It's over 20 years of a career in education, and said, all right,
I believe in this.
I
I'm
believe
going
in
for
this
it.
so much that we're going to do this.
Amazing.
Right? And so
Yeah.
I completely cashed it in. And so then at that point, it was like, okay, we can't fail.
Yeah. Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary. Welcome to this episode of the Hidden City Podcast. Today we're very excited to have our friend Claudia here. She is the co-founder of Whose Books and co-founder of ARCO as well. Claudia, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to sit down and talk to you.
Yeah.
It's fun to have you over here at Tyler Station for a day.
I know. We spent a lot of time here before. Right?
I know. So Claudia, you were just saying you grew up one stop down the dart rail from here.
Yeah.
And I think both of your parents were educators as well. How did growing up in Oak Cliff or being from Oak Cliff and having educators as parents kind of shape who you are?
Absolutely. So my parents were both, they didn't grow up here in Dallas or in Oak Cliff, but they moved to Oak Cliff area once they started teaching for Dallas ISD. They really believed in that you should live in the neighborhood that you're teaching in, right? And so that's how we, kind of landed here. And so grew up right off of Hampton. Maybe 2 blocks away from the Hampton station. And them being educators, how did that shape me? I mean, I think it was like everything, right? I swore that I would never be an educator because I thought it was the worst thing. They only got paid once a month, and I thought it was horrible having to wait for the 15th of the month every month. Kid mentality,
For
right?
Sure.
But they were grading papers all the time, doing lesson plans, helping to create, field trips and experiences for kids. But I think what shaped us the most is the love for literature and reading. There was always books in our home. We were gifted books. We were taken to bookstores. We were taken to libraries. It was just this it was everything in everything that we did, right?
That's awesome.
So
It was a priority for them.
absolutely.
And they were intentional about, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to take you to the bookstore today and you get to pick out a book.
Yes. And it, not just them. I would also say that like my extended family, my aunts and uncles, it was, we would get a present and it would be a book with an inscription in it, right? I still have books that were inscribed to me from, maybe my 9th or 10th birthday, right?
That's amazing.
So there was just this value of knowledge and that you could explore and you could encounter things through books and learn things through books that you wouldn't be able to pick up in a classroom, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember when you gave a Texas talk here at Wax Space many years ago, you mentioned some interesting statistics about book ownership as well. And I that one that stuck with me was if you have 100 books in your home, there's some significant differences in maybe the outcomes for the kids in that home.
Right. The research shows that 100 books in the home is kind of like the tipping point, right?
Yeah.
And so in households that you see where there are 100 books or more in the home, you also see that there's a stark difference in high school completion, higher ed learning, economic mobility, employment stability, all of those kind of demographics, right, and data points that we know kind of lead to what we call, maybe like a better kind of way of living, right? Or
It's the tipping point of
it's
sorts.
a tipping.
No, I know. I think about that talk often too. The kids and I will go to the library, and my wife takes them a time. But then it's also just getting books all the time. You're like, oh, you kind of are surrounded by this, and you can take it for granted, but it sounds like in your home, it wasn't. It was very much like a value that was instilled to you. And
it was, and the bookstores and the libraries both had very special and significant roles, right?
100%. Yeah.
The libraries were a place of exploration, kind of see things that you'd like. But then when you found something that you really wanted, or you knew that this book, you didn't want to take it back, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then that's when we would transition over to let's go to the bookstore and make sure that these are now part of our home library.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we would, when you were at Tyler Station, walk down with the boys and they would pick out, you know, their books, and we still have them. They're just like, they wanted them. They wanted them to be there. And you know, you'd always just play around with them and read them and do all the things. So, yeah.
Well, what was the bookstore scene growing up here?
Inconsistent, right? So in Oak Cliff, there were at different times, and Oak Cliff is big, right?
It's big.
So
we've talked about that on the show.
That's the thing. It's like trying to explain to people. It's like, oh, it's not just for sports, y'all. It is big.
Right. It's really, really big. And so I have to say that there are some, like Pan-African Connection Bookstore is part of Oak Cliff, right? But it's more in the southern Oak Cliff center. And so that's a bookstore that's been in there for generations, right? There was another Black-owned bookstore that was in Wynwood Village.
Oh, cool. I think I read about this one.
Yeah.
Do you remember the
I
name?
can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of it right now, but that was another one that was longstanding. But on our kind of side, right, where I grew up, in our part of Oak Cliff, there was never consistent access to bookstores. As a kid growing up, as a young mother, as a teacher, some things had kind of popped up, but they never kind of really stayed, right? It's a challenging business right? It's a very challenging business. So when we wanted to go to the bookstore, and especially to have like a good selection, and we would have to either travel north or to the suburbs, right? And so that's what, luckily, our parents had the agency to do, and me as a young mom had that for my children too.
Yeah. Well, libraries, I know David actually was helpful in founding the one library off of Hampton, wasn't he?
Marquise.
Oh, yeah. I believe so, yeah.
Were libraries like a big part of it at all? Or was
we had the library that I grew up going to was off of Hampton. But there was also the North Oak Cliff Library too, which is closer to where our bookstore is now. So those have been long standing, right? And it's been really good. The challenge, I think, is like when the city goes through budget cuts and then they shut down, certain days of the week, or the hours are cut,
Consistency.
Consistency. And so then that creates an issue with access, right?
Did they get the bond? Did they get more funding, I think? Or I don't know. That might be
maybe
something I remember hearing.
That's a good question.
It'd be great. More
I think it'd be
more
one,
libraries.
to look into.
There
was, I know this last time around, there was some push to defund some of the things.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of kind of local advocacy to speak up about it. I need to go back and check. I think that maybe there were cuts, but not as much. I'm not for certain though.
Yeah. We'll fact check ourselves later.
That's interesting though. You were saying you basically have to leave Oak Cliff to go find a good bookstore, or even to have consistent library usage. And I think I remember too you showing a map of the whole DFW area and sort of book ownership, and how there was kind of a lot of red in the Oak Cliff.
So it's interesting.
portion.
So there's a map that's called the Book Desert Map, right? And they've kind of pulled data together from different, like from census data, from National Education Agency data, all of this data to create a heat map of where book ownership is in certain cities, or really all over the country. You can put in a zip code and you can find out, right? So that when you look at Dallas and the greater Dallas area, it's very evident that the areas that are green, which is the percentage of the households that have 100 books or more, right, are primarily north of downtown Dallas, right? And then there are some pockets that are kind of yellow, and then you have some pockets that are red and orange, right? And those red and orange areas are the areas where the majority of the households do not have that, right? Do not have 100 books or more in their households. And so when you look at our neighborhood, our zip codes, we fall in those red areas, those book desert areas. There's one area that is kind of a yellow area, and that's Kessler Park, right? And
Sure enough.
so then you look at it, right? And then when we started to look at the data, to me, just knowing some of the history of our city, right?
Of course.
It resembled to me the same as the food deserts, healthcare deserts. And so I started to think about it a little bit more and pull some information back. And then if you kind of overlay it with the redlining maps that have been used in the city, right? Then you see that they pretty much align, right? And so looking to see that, these are things or lasting effects of practices that were used in Dallas, right? To really decide who had access to what and where money was going to be invested. And the more that we kind of explore this work and the more that we're involved in trying to build this reading culture, I think, and as educators too, we were able to see that it has lasting ramifications, right? And so when you look at reading scores and literacy rates, right, then you'll see that in the book desert areas, it's hard, right? There's a gap there compared to the areas that have, high book ownership and more fluency.
So being in this desert, how does Claudia and Whose Books promote, or what kind of strategies do you have to book ownership for?
Well, I think when John and I, John's my husband and partner
John's
in life
awesome.
and business.
Shout out to John.
And we always had this dream of opening up a bookstore. That was something that John grew up here in Oak Cliff too, right? And so we have very similar experiences. And it was when we retire, we'll do this. And so we had this idea of what retirement looked like, all right? But during COVID, like everybody, right? It's reevaluating things.
Man.
And we're well, why do we have to wait until retirement age? So we decided to go ahead and, transition. And so our idea at that point was we'll open up a bookstore, we'll create access. And by this time, as we know here in Oak Cliff, we have wild detectives, we have lucky dogs, right?
Yeah,
at that
yeah,
point.
you have a little bit of a community going.
Right, you have a little bit of a community going. Poets had just opened up too.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And we knew that what we wanted to do would be in addition to that, right? Not in competition, but an additional opportunity. So we envisioned a community-facing bookstore that had events for the entire family, that had books for the entire family, that had books available in both English and Spanish, right? And so we started kind of dreaming this up and what it would look like. We also kind of put out just feelers out in the community, surveys and all these things just to get feedback to say, if this were to happen, what would you like to see?
Yeah.
And that helped to kind of shape it.
That's cool.
And our idea at that point was if you build it, they will come. If we create access, we will have this impact, right? And yes, all that was true, right?
Yeah.
I think 50% of kind of our original clientele or visitors were people who, what we call, they were lifetime readers, right? And they were excited about having another place that they could browse and that they could, collect books from. Then the other half of the people that were coming to us is what we refer to as new to reading, right? That maybe have not had a very good relationship with reading, or one that, that they were very proud of or had a chance to really explore. And so they would come into the bookstore and it would be a little bit of kind of what do I do here, right?
Yeah. How does this work?
Is this a library? Is it Blockbuster? We would get how do you find a price on a book, right? And these are all things that if you grew up in a household that reads, this doesn't make any sense to you because it's
it's a treasure.
You these are things. You know how it works. You know how it operates. But if you've never had access to and you've never been in a bookstore, how would you know, right?
Yeah.
And we had more and more people like that. And then it just reiterated that what we were doing was, the right thing and what we needed to do. And so that's where Whose Books kind of started. And then it led to our nonprofit arm, which is ARCO that you mentioned. ARCO is our literary nonprofit. It's a 501c3. And what we do is we do all of the programming, right, through ARCO to help create what we say in three easy things: book access, positive reading experiences, and third spaces, right? And through that, we help to activate and build the reading culture. And then Whose Books is the physical space, right? And handles the actual selling of the books.
I want to get into ARCO so much more.
Yeah.
I had a question with Whose Books.
Absolutely.
Kind of as I think one of the struggles was working with local developers and trying to convince them that like, hey, this is worth. There is an appetite for this, or we can make this work. How would you describe that journey when you're trying to establish that third space? Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't anticipate that people would not want to support us, right? Like, and
it seems
say,
like a pretty easy thing to support.
Yeah,
in terms
right.
Of like,
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But some local developers, without giving names, right? The responses that I would got was like, oh, we already have Wild Detectives and a book, the comics. Remember there was Pegasus comics book.
Oh yeah, that's right.
One, right? Yeah, and they were like, there's not a need for anything else.
It's already full.
Yeah. It's going to be oversaturated if there's another one. So that was one response. Another response recognized me as being the principal from the high school, and then was like, people don't read anymore. Like, this. Why would you want to open a bookstore?
Oh, developers.
Bold statement.
And so I felt like I was always having to justify and explain, and that's part of opening a small business. I get that, right? But it was also the tone and just, it was a little bit too much, and so. So we kept looking, and then that's where we ended up here at Tyler Station. We met with Monty, and Monty was like, we have this incubator space. It's a short-term lease. You can give it a shot and kind of see, right, if it works. And so that's why I think Tyler Station was a great starting point for us. Literally just blocks away from where I grew up, not far from where John grew up. It's at the crossroads of several different neighborhoods. It was near public transportation, which is important to us too. And it really allowed us to kind of, open the doors, test things out.
Claudia, we miss you.
I know.
We love all the success there that you have on Davis Street. But
no, it is success. That's the good.
That's
part
the best part. Yeah.
This episode of The Hidden City is brought to you by Oak Cliff Brewing. Celebrate Cinco de Mayo on Saturday, May 3rd in the beer garden at Oak Cliff Brewing. Enjoy tacos from Trampo Rey, micheladas, and live music from Trinity Rio Band, plus plenty of cold beer to go around. Go to oakcliffbrewing.com to learn more and check out their full schedule of events.
Tell us about those early days, because obviously being an educator, coming from being a principal to now a small business owner, during the pandemic time frame, how did that go? How was that transition?
I think we knew just enough to not be scared,
but
not enough to like run the other way.
That's a theme. It's like with the entrepreneurs.
Exactly what Javi said to us. Which is important, right?
Right.
If you know too much, then you're gonna run.
You're gonna. It's
the brewery.
It's like the numbers don't add.
Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
this is not going to be a lucrative business. But we also, we put our own skin in the game, right? So like we had trouble with finding physical space. So you can only imagine what it was when we tried to get, small business loans or investors, right?
Right.
So what we did, I cashed in my retirement, right?
Wow.
I completely cashed in my retirement.
It's a big move,
it's over 20 years of a career in education, and said, all right, I believe in this so much that we're going to do this.
Amazing.
Right? And so I completely cashed it in. And so then at that point, it was like, okay, we can't fail.
You've burned the boats. It's like there's no going back.
There's no going back, right? We said we were going to do this. We're going to do it, and we're going to find a way to make it work, right? And so we did, and it was not, and it still isn't. We are now going into our 4th year.
Amazing.
It's
wild.
But it's still, you're saying it's still
tough. It's still tough. We are strong. We have deep roots. We used to be on a day-to-day, like, oh, we made it another day, right? Then we got to, we're like, we made it another week.
And we have money to pay the bill.
Oh, okay, we still have a roof over our head. we're in a better place now, right? Where we can like project quarter to quarter.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's like,
That's great.
it's big, right? That's huge.
Yeah, for a small business,
For a small
that's a big deal.
business. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, there were like lots of little failures.
Yeah.
But you learn from each one, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Or we're going to be smarter about how we do this.
It's the only way to do it.
I
It's just to
think-
fail a bunch, I
Yeah.
think.
Fail, yeah. And I also think about, I'm like, hearing your story, and I've heard this from other entrepreneurs as well, is just like this starting the business, taking that leap, putting in the retirement, like what's driving you to do that? Because there's so many reasons not to start a small business
Right.
or whatever, you know, like it is.
I think for me is that the more I looked at it and the work that we did in the schools and within our community, to me it was really about equity, right? Like having a good reading culture, having access to choice, to so many different options, shouldn't just be available to the most affluent communities. It shouldn't just be available to where there's a lot of investment dollars, right? Like it has to start somewhere. And so for us, it was like, well, then let's do this, right?
Yeah.
And we were lucky in that I think that the work that Javi was doing, the work that Lucky Dog and that Pan-African Connection, and, you know, they were already kind of setting
You had some
the
partners in
foundation, and
this
we
a
had
little
some
bit.
partners. And so when we joined in and said, okay, you know, we're opening up Whose Books, and we're same in this ways, but different in these, right?
Yeah.
They have just all been like welcoming. It's such a great community. We all come together every year for Independent Bookstore Day now.
Love it.
And we do the Oak Cliff Book Crawl. It's a huge
awesome.
thing. Now there's another bookstore that has just opened up in the area, and it's one that is just specifically romance.
Oh, wow.
And so now you have 6
Great.
bookstores in Oak Cliff, and it's becoming an attraction. Like we have people coming from all over
Yeah.
outside of Dallas
Independent bookstores.
to come to the bookstores. Yeah. So from a book desert, right, to
like the
now the
flourishing.
highest concentration of bookstores in the city of Dallas. Like that's huge,
That's
right?
amazing.
Yeah, that's a
That's
win.
huge.
That's such a win.
It is so cool, too, that it's collaborative.
Yeah.
It's not competitive first. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
that, and that is such a theme for the show and Oak Cliff in general. It's small business owners over here just want to see you succeed. They want,
Maybe not the developers.
they want to root
but
Yeah, if you can get past the developers.
pass it on the business owners. They're like, collaborate. That's great.
yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I love that there is that welcoming nature with
It
a lot of
is.
business owners.
I've heard that so
Yeah.
time and time again. I got to ask, Whose Books? Can you give us the reason for the name? What is it? Like, why?
Well, the idea of like whose books, right? Like
Yeah.
whose are they, right?
Ah.
They're for all of us. They're for everyone.
There's everyone's books.
Yeah. So whose books is our kind of way of, you know, just pushing the question,
Yeah.
right? And so it has been great, and the community, I think, was more than ready for it. And we're now 4 years in, right? We're going into our 4th year, and we still have people that come into the bookstore for the first time, and they get teary-eyed or they get emotional, and they share life stories with us and tell us that, you know, they never saw themselves in the bookstores. Like, you know, like they could go to big box bookstores and they know what they're going to find there, right?
Yeah.
But then when they come to the independent bookstores and our bookstore, that they see a very specific type of curation, and they feel seen in what's offered in the shelf.
Yeah.
And that is huge to us, right? And so that has come not just by the curation that John and I do, but also by the feedback. Like the neighbors in the community will say, "Hey, I just read this book, and it's not a really big title, but I think other people in the neighborhood would like it," right?
That's
and
cool.
so
Yeah.
it's dynamic. It's always changing. It's just really responsive to what the community is interested in and what we're talking about and what we want to learn. You know.
We were just talking to Emma Ruby about kind of this same concept of just like how special Oak Cliff is with
Yeah.
that feedback loop of sorts.
Yeah.
How you can kind of like, if something's happening, like, go talk to the person.
Yeah,
Or like,
exactly.
and it's small enough that you can kind of,
Yes.
I don't know, have that intimate relationship with a bookstore owner and like the products that are there, and the other reading communities that are around you. I think that's pretty special for the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a real gift to have like a curated living collection that you can come peruse at any time. And it's not, like you said, just a big box. You kind of know what you're going to get when you go to that, which it can be good in its own way.
Right. There's good in that. There is good in that. But there's also a need for something else, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what people find here. And so, and that they're also able, like, it's funny because people look at us like stunned sometimes. If we don't have a book, it's impossible for us to have every book, right? It's just impossible, right? Yeah. Or we'll order a book that's gotten like very popular and we sell out within, 2 or 3 days. And so it takes time. And they're like, well, I really need it. We live in a culture of like, I need it now, right?
Prime now.
Like now.
Thanks a lot, Amazon.
Yeah.
Front
and
door
so we'll
8
pick
hours.
up, and we'll pick up the phone and we'll call poets or we'll call wild detectives or Pan-African, and they'll do the same, right? And
awesome.
It's
You're
like, like we don't have it, but they have it around the corner over at this store. And people are just floored by every time that we do that, right? Or that someone else does that, for us. But we would much rather that you support another local independent bookstore than to get it off of Amazon. There's some things inevitably that we know that we have to go to Amazon. Like they have you need this screw and you can't find it.
But if you can avoid the evil empire.
Can avoid it, if you can avoid it, or if you can try local at least 2 or 3 times before you go.
I think go to you and you guys can order a book, right?
We do.
On behalf of
absolutely
the business too.
I do feel like that's another just the bias of the show, Oak Cliff. It's a great thing about this community is they do. You say try local, and it's like they do. Yeah, like they come out, and that's I could see why other bookstore owners are very much in that mindset of just like, all right, I could maybe open this up in this community because these people share that value.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, as you think about the journey from educator to business owner, have there been some moments? I know you mentioned people walking into the store and just crying, or just people for the first time never seeing themselves in books. Right. Now all of a sudden they can. Have there been some moments that you can remember of kind of how you've seen the reading culture change over time
absolutely.
here in Oak Cliff?
I think, we get some of that feedback, right? Every day, right? Yeah. One of the things that we used to kind of envision or hope for is like, you go to other cities in the United States, like let's say New York, San Francisco, Boston, Chicago. It doesn't matter where you are in the city, you're going to find somebody with a book in their hand, right? They could be on the bus in public transportation. They could be sitting at a park, at a cafe, at a wine bar, right? That was not always the feel here, right? Yeah. But if you go and you're walking around the neighborhood and you see that now.
Yeah, you see more of that.
You can just visibly see evidence of that reading culture. So that's one thing that's cool. Huge, right? The other thing is one of the things that we're kind of known for is our community story times, right? And that we build these like really cool experiences for the families of like making it positive and engaging, and we gift the first 10 families who come to our story times get a gifted copy of the book. It's our way through ARCO to help build home libraries.
That's really cool.
So it's really cool. But not only that, but it's happening now in other places, like all around the community. We have neighborhoods that are reaching out. Like we just have one of our regulars that lives in Keystwood, and they're like, we're doing story time now. And we're wondering if y'all could help us out. And so, we're going to help sponsor some books for their story time, right?
It's amazing. So people are actually starting their own story
They're starting their own story times. They're starting them in some of the retail shops that are like in the Bishop Arts area. They're starting them at some of the coffee shops that are, I think B-Side now does a story time,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And so all of these other places, right, are also doing these things, which is wonderful because that's what you need in a community to build a strong reading culture. Like reading culture is how we value and engage with books, right? And the value that's presented in them, not only in the home but also in the community, which then informs the schools, right? And so, for what has been happening for a long time is like, this is a responsibility of the schools, right? And then when it's not happening, then it's like, what's happening in the classroom? Why aren't the teachers able to teach the kids to read? Well, if we're waiting till when kids get to school, that's way too late, right? Like that's too late.
Claudia, you were talking about how the school, the home, and the community kind of all work together, and it's not just like, all right, siloed off, school, you take care of this, and community, you take care of this.
So that's why we believe, like, in our community, if we build this reading culture, right, then where the families really value the importance of books and stories and what they can offer, and the community values it, you see it in the everyday kind of workings. Then as kids go to school, right, they've already grown up with this exposure, with this positive relationship to what books is, what storytelling is, what you can learn from them. And that in turn just makes that transition to school smoother. Yeah. So you'll see and you hear a lot of research about the gap that's happening with pre-K readiness, right? In a lot of the neighborhoods that are considered low socioeconomic status, right? But if you keep peeling all of that back, right, then it all comes back to what are the prior experiences that they're having before they go to school. Yeah. And so for us, a strong reading culture in the community is saying we value this as a community, right? And then in the home, it's valued so that by the time they get to school, they're already ready for it, right? They've primed the brain to say, this is something good, this is something positive, this is something that I can jump into.
They're open to learning.
Yes.
And otherwise, if they aren't primed, then it's going to be a lot longer road.
Right. It's not to say that it's not going to happen, because we have great teachers who are creating these experiences in the classroom, but it makes it all that much easier.
It's different roles, you know, that they can. I go back to like the bookstore, I believe, has such a big role in this. We would go to the half price books over in East Dallas, and it was like magic going in there, because you're just like, you can get lost. You get lost in these little areas. You're like finding whatever, but then you get to take it home and you get to keep it. And like, I think those moments are, I don't know. I don't have a specific book I remember from that or anything, but I do remember those moments vividly off of in Lakewood area where you're just like, oh, this is special. So I see that part of this where it's like, no, we as a society value the bookstore and like we value
absolutely
changing the values of an area is not a small undertaking. That's a huge thing to do.
Yeah.
But it can snowball.
It can,
and it is. I think.
And I think you were hinting at right there is something that is so telling, right? So you were talking about the experience of walking into the store, about browsing, right? And so browsing in itself is an experience that is really foreign to a lot of people now, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll get people who are new to reading or new to bookstores that are come in and they get completely overwhelmed, right? Or don't know where to start.
Have anxiety about
it. Or want to be told what to read. And I have a personal opinion that that's all from like the algorithms and
it's like rewiring
how our brains have been rewired, right? By social media and ads and all.
Yeah, it's just like being like
8 second. We have no attention span anymore.
Exactly.
So we can't process looking at 1,000 books in one place.
Right. And so we always ask, and like John and I talk about this all the time, is like, what is the best way to kind of connect with someone who is new to reading, right? And so one of the things that we always ask is like, well, what are you interested in, right? Or what do you want to learn about? Or are you curious about something?
Yeah.
And even sometimes that is a tough question. No, sometimes that's a tough question for people because they're like, well, I don't know.
I haven't really reflected on it.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Whatever the feed tells me I'm interested in.
Exactly.
Right? I know.
I saw this on TikTok, right? And so it's like, okay, well, we can start you there, right? Let's start with that.
Sure.
So it's interesting, right? And so, but it is kind of rewiring and rethinking about like, what is the experience that I want with this? And so for a lot of people, what we found is that the experience that they've had with reading and with books is one that has been frustrating, one that has been punitive, one that has been even traumatic, right? For some instances.
Terrible. I mean, it's like all negative experiences, basically.
Right.
And then you grow up and you don't even bother thinking about reading.
Well, hell, I don't want to read a book.
Yeah. And it's like, that's better than Netflix if you get a good book. Like, you got to find the right ones.
Yeah. So
Okay,
we
that was a book nerd moment. Better than that.
Yes, it is.
This episode of The Hidden City is brought to you by Texas Talks, a monthly lecture series presented by Wax Space focused on sharing ideas for the neighborhood. Started in 2019 as a way to bring neighbors together to share ideas, learn from experiences, and expand the Oak Cliff mind. Check out the full library of past talks at thewaxspace.com/Texas Talks and join us for our next live event with Kate McLeod on May 16th at 9 a.m. at Wax Space.
We were talking about priming children kind of for school and going to school. I'm just curious from your perspective, are there things outside of ownership that you would maybe even recommend with parents, or as you think about kind of kids being prepared and developing this love for reading without it being a punishment or without it being something traumatic, like you were saying?
I think shame is the biggest thing, right? Like, so we have kids or families that come into the store and they're super excited because they see a book that they like, right?
Yeah.
And it might be like an early chapter book or a graphic novel or something, right? And a parent or a caregiver will say, that's a baby book, or no, that only has pictures in it, or like, and they do this openly in public, right? Or you're not going to finish that book, they say all these things, all this negative talk, and you can just see the joy in the kids, just like poof, like it's just sucked right out of them, and to where they don't even want anything now, right? Like, and if that is what is being said in public, right?
What's
then
happening? Just them together. You know?
And so then what we try to do, and it's all well-meaning, right?
Sure,
it's all well-meaning, because you do want your child to read on the reading level that's appropriate for them. You do want them to read something that's going to challenge their thinking. Like, those are all truth statements, right? Like, you want that. And it's okay to just really love a book or the illustrations or the cover, and just like something. There's a magic that happens when you're in a bookstore, regardless of your age, that like when something draws you in, whether it's the author's name or the jacket of the book or a quote on the back, that in itself, if it's piqued your interest and it's drawn you in, it's worth it, right? Like, experience it and let them. And so I think for parents and caregivers and teachers, and I've been guilty of it as an educator before too, right, is allow them to engage with what they want to. It's how we then talk about what they've read, right? And how we question, and how we, like, where we go from there, that really is going to stretch their thinking, right? And so that's the thing that we try to like just kind of build in through our regular conversations with
I love
people.
that. Yeah. I think of the flip side probably being true too for adults. It's okay to read a book that, maybe is a children's book, but it's a great story.
Absolutely.
You don't have to feel shame about picking that
And
up.
we have adults that come in and will get like middle grade books or young adult books, and they're like, this is my little, and I'm like, love it. It's great.
Yeah.
I think I did young adult books for a while. I was like, still maybe,
I mean,
that's
we
awesome.
read for different reasons,
That's
right?
true.
Right.
Yeah.
There's sometimes that we're reading for entertainment.
Yep.
There's sometimes that we're reading to escape, or we're reading to learn something or to explore a new perspective. And they're all great reasons for reading. And so we shouldn't shame any
For
of
sure.
that, right?
I feel like sometimes I get stuck in ruts where I'm like, I just want to learn, and like I'll read that for a while, and I'm like, oh, I need to have some fiction, or I need to like change it up a little bit. When you're talking about the reasons for coming to some of these books, sometimes that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Claudia, we asked this of Javi, and he hated the question. But do you have a favorite book at your store right now?
My gosh.
Or I know.
That's the worst.
I know.
The audacity to ask it twice.
Hey, that's just happening.
Okay, let's see. Favorite book. That is really, really hard.
I know.
Because it all depends on like the mood and all of that.
Yeah.
And what you're reading for,
And what I'm reading for. right now I have this goal of reading at least one book in Spanish every month to
cool.
practice my own Spanish, right? To continue to make sure that I stay up with it. And so I am reading a book right now that's called Las Madres, and so the mothers. And it's a beautiful book by a Puerto Rican writer. And it has dual timelines and multiple points of view. And I'm just loving it because it is pulling me into a completely different culture of my own, right? And so it's an experience like for all the senses. And so, but I think that that's true for me. Like every book I read becomes my favorite while I'm reading
That's
it.
good.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Like even books that like, there's some books that like I won't finish.
Yeah.
And some people will like shame that book or like give it like, nah, it was a bad book or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think about it that way. The way I think about like if there's a book that I don't finish, then to me, it's just like I got what I needed from it.
Yeah.
You know, if it was the first 25 or 50 pages, like I got what I needed from it and I move on.
I think that's a good reminder, and I think we talked about that with Javi too, but you can put down a book. You don't have to finish it. And that's okay. It's
You
like,
could stop
that
the
doesn't
Netflix
mean-
show.
doesn't mean you didn't get, it
exactly.
doesn't mean you didn't get something out of it.
But if I had to say, what is a book that I revisit over and over again?
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
That's what we're
Yeah, so
looking
I
for.
would say Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude.
Ooh.
I read that for the very first time when I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. It was way over my head, right? But it was like my dad was like, you need to read this. And it was a shared reading. And I've probably read it once every year
That's amazing.
since
Yeah.
then.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And every time that I read it, I encounter something new.
That's the magic.
So
I do
So I
love that
think-
about some great books. It's that can be it can actually be a problem for trying to read new books because you're
Yeah.
like, I'm going to reread what I know is a great
Yes.
book and get something out of it again.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, or my mom had we had a book club, and my mom goes to almost all of our book clubs. We have
cool.
8 book clubs at
Okay.
the bookstore. Right?
Eight?
Like eight,
Amazing.
Awesome.
8 book clubs.
That's
a
cool.
book club for everybody.
Yeah.
And so she gave a rating of one of the books. She's like, I didn't like it. It wasn't like the first one. And I'm like, well, it's not the first one. She's like, but I wanted it to be like the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just
that
like I
captures
wanted
it.
that feeling, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, well, just read that one again.
Yeah, that's right. Go back to it.
That's amazing.
So
So we've mentioned ARCO.
Yes,
Could you tell us what that stands for, and then
Absolutely.
also tell us a little bit more about what the mission of ARCO is?
Yeah. So ARCO stands for Activating Reading Communities Organization. And our mission is to activate reading culture in Dallas,
Cool.
right?
Cool.
Specifically in the southern sector, which has been a challenge to me by people who are living in the northern sector and said, no, we need this too, right?
Oh, that
and
is
so it is
interesting.
interesting. But ultimately, it's how do we build that culture, right, for the love and the appreciation of books, right, and for reading. And we do that through book access. And so what we do, we don't call it donating books. We call it gifting, right? So we gift books into the community. So last year we gifted over 2,500 books into the community.
Well, that's
Right?
amazing.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And sometimes the way that we gift those books is through, like when we do our community story times, the first 10 families, sometimes up to 15, just depending how we are on grants and funds, right? We'll get a gifted copy of the book. Sometimes we do it for people who have come into the store multiple times and they show an interest, but they're always hesitant. And as we get to talk to them, we realize that it's because cost is prohibitive, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, we're able to say, well, we can gift you these books through our nonprofit, right?
That's so cool.
Then we partner with other organizations that, like nonprofit organizations that work with youth or even adults and say, let's connect what you're doing to literature, and we bring them in. And then we find literature and books that align with what they're doing. And then we gift books there too, right? So there's all these different options where we can gift books into the community, but we always do it in connection with programming. It's never in isolation, right? It's never like here are these books, you can take them if you want them.
Yeah.
No, we prime it and we connect it with a positive experience because we really believe that that'll make the book meaningful and valuable for them, right?
Oh, that's cool.
So that's our book access. And then the positive reading experiences kind of goes right along with that. But that's story times, book clubs, author events, meeting the author, all of these things that just add a whole nother value to like, yes, the book was cool and I got to meet the author
really
and I
smart.
learned
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah.
These are things that have happened all the time in the city, in different parts of the city, but it didn't always feel accessible to everybody, right? So bringing authors into the Oak Cliff community and saying, here is this New York Times bestselling author, and you have a chance to connect with them, right? Either completely free or on a donation-based model.
Oh,
and
cool.
So
Okay.
what that is like, you can buy a ticket for $5 because that's what works for you.
Right.
Or you can buy a ticket for $30 because that's what works for your budget, right?
That's awesome.
So we do those kinds of events. And then the third spaces. And third spaces is really when we partner with other organizations to kind of bridge in, like how can we create dialogue about this topic?
Cool.
So we have one that's going to be coming up in May that will be looking at a book on critical race theory. So it'll be a community and conversation with the authors about that. We have another one that's going to be on development in neighborhoods that are in the throes of gentrification, right?
Oh, wow,
and
yeah.
so it's like,
Are these at your store? usually, or-
these will
okay,
be at
okay,
the store.
Okay.
Almost always. If
Almost always,
if
okay.
attendance if attendance looks like it's going to be more than what we can handle, then we partner with other
Group. Okay.
organizations. Yeah. So like recently, we partnered with Oak Cliff Cultural Center, and we had one
Awesome.
there. So
Come to Wax Space for
so
one of
cool.
these.
Yeah.
Is it is there a place that people can support ARCO as well?
yeah.
Okay.
mhm. So our website is readwitharco.org.
Cool.
And on there, you can see kind of everything that is our mission, a lot of the programming that we do, and donations can be made on there too. We recently launched inside of the bookstore. We have this one kind of wall where we have used books. And what that does, it helps us to keep funding our book access programs. So what we do is we'll do a book drive every quarter. And our customers, community members will come back and they'll donate books that they're ready to move on, right? And then those donated books are put on our used bookshelf. And it's really like 3 shelves. It's not a lot, right? But we rotate the books through. And it is a donation-based model. So like paperbacks are $5, hardbacks are $7. And
Nice.
when people purchase, it's actually a donation to ARCO.
That's cool.
And then that money is then used to gift brand new books into the community.
What a great model.
So-
That is an awesome
Yeah.
So
model.
cool.
So it's been really good because it allows us, like we have so many customers that say, like, I took 3 boxes, no shade on half price books, but I took 3 boxes to half price books and got $2.
Right. Yeah. All of a sudden you're like,
You know,
You're like,
they're like, I'd much rather donate it
yeah.
knowing that it's going to this cause,
and
right?
it's actually funding the cause.
And it's
right?
also
Yeah.
actually funding the cause.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
so we'll do that. The only thing is that we're very specific of when we do take donations because storage is an issue.
Fair.
yeah.
And then again, because of the value that we want to make sure that like we ask when people are gifting books, like don't gift us books that had no value
Right.
just
Yeah.
to
Right.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that are like outdated and
Yeah.
promote negative stereotypes.
Yeah.
We want books that are inclusive, that are representative, that are diverse, that are still in good shape.
Yeah.
And our community has been great.
That's awesome. That's
awesome.
Claudia, when Diana asked this question, when you've been looking around, you're saying all these different cities that have bookstores and book culture. Are there any bookstores that you're like, this is like the one, or these are the ones that like we strive to be like or are super inspired by? Because I feel like you're bringing in all this knowledge from
Absolutely.
kind of like your own experiences, but from other places to kind of create Whose Books and this nonprofit.
I think I'm looking over at John because I
yeah.
know what he's thinking. So Books and Books. Books and Books is a bookstore in Miami. And so they started off back in the 1970s, early 70s, and very tiny, like we did at Tyler Station, right?
Neat.
And now I think they have 6 different locations all over Miami.
Wow.
And it's so funny because so he's kind of our mentor.
Cool.
And he's taught us a lot, and we've gone to visit, and we've learned a lot from his journey.
Yeah.
But when we were there visiting, of course, we kind of posted like, we're here at Books and Books. And then so many of our customers here said, I grew up in Books and Books.
No
and
way.
y'all
Cool.
do remind me of that,
Oh, that's cool.
So it was
Awesome.
really, really cool. But I think what they've done is they've grown their footprint in a way that allows to have that feeling of like I can get lost in here, but still feels like an independent bookstore. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a big box, right? But
Yeah.
you do have the ability to kind of get lost in the stacks,
Oh,
right?
that's great. Yeah.
And then they have regular literary programming, and then they have some like on the weekends maybe some music, and they have like a nice little deli, and so
fun.
just
That's
kind
cool.
of, and then the
Is
cafe.
it like a large store, or is it?
It's probably it's pretty large. It has 1, 2, 3, 4. The main location has about 5 different rooms.
Oh, cool.
But it's designed in such a way that it doesn't feel like 5 different rooms. It feels like it still feels like an independent bookstore.
Books and Books.
Books and Books.
Yeah, put that on.
Yeah, you got to visit
list.
Books and
What
Books.
are your favorites? I don't even.
Oh, bookstores.
Yeah, it's like Book People in Austin. I always enjoyed.
Yeah.
going there.
Yeah, Book People's a cool one.
Was it Pals? Is like
Yeah, that's those are
Pals
good
is
ones.
great.
Pals is great.
Yeah, I
Half price. I don't know.
Yeah, I was
Back in
gonna
the
say,
day, East
Half
Dallas.
Price is
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the only one I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yeah.
No, that's good stuff.
Nice. Oh, that's so cool. We'll have to check that one out. Miami.
Yeah.
I'm just we're thankful for the work you're doing here in Oak Cliff, Whose Books and ARCO, and all of this. It's pretty awesome. So Claudia, thanks for being on the show. And
appreciate it.
yeah,
It's good
of course.
to see y'all again.
Thanks for coming over.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend. And thanks so much for tuning in.